Do you want to know how to market your short film so that it gets way more views and traction on the internet? What about if submitting to film festivals is worth it or not? And what are the best ways to promote your short film on every social platform? We'll cover all those things plus more in this video, so let's dive in. Hey there, I'm Jordan and welcome back to my channel. This channel is all about filmmaking techniques, the philosophy of art, creative and technical workflows, and essentially what filmmaking can teach us about life. I'm so excited to dive into the fifth and final part in the case study series on how I made my short film Cuddle Buddies about a professional cuddler. I wrote, directed, edited, and produced the film after post-production. Now that the film was fully complete, the next step was to make sure that I could get as many people to watch it as possible. As they say, making a film is half the battle, and the other half is getting it seen. Part 1, to submit to film festivals or not. Throughout the pre-production and development phases, I had created a running spreadsheet of a long list of festivals, from the biggest festivals such as Sundance and Cannes to much smaller and niche film festivals that had a little bit more of a specific subject matter that would really fit within the realm of the narrative and genre that Cuddle Buddies was. Part of the reason we wanted to target some of the smaller festivals was that with a little bit more of a niche focus, that increased our chances of getting in. I continued to update this spreadsheet all throughout the post-production process, especially as we started to submit to festivals, and I color-coded every festival on there based off if we got in, if we got rejected, or if we were still waiting to hear back, and really help track our budget in that way as well. That way we could make sure that we hit them and didn't miss these submission deadlines as they passed. The other information that we included on the festival spreadsheet was the location of the festival, the submission fees, when the submission deadlines were due, including the early, regular, and late deadlines, and any other pertinent info that felt like it was relevant to the festival. We used the website Film Freeway, which is a really great resource for submitting to virtually any film festival that exists, with the exception of a select few bigger festivals. But what's nice about this is you can create a project page, you can upload a link, put all the info, all the crew and filmmaker and actor info for your project page, and then you could use the same page to submit to any festival that you want to with the click of a button. And then once your project page is created for your film, it's as easy as the click of a button to submit to any festival that you want to, as long as you pay the submission fee. Virtually every film festival we were able to submit through Film Freeway, though I should note that some of the bigger film festivals, especially ones overseas like Cannes or the Venice Film Festival, they have their own website submission form in which you can only submit to the festival through their own website. Admittedly, my least favorite part about submitting to festivals is the high submission fees that really start to add up, especially if you submit to a large number of film festivals. I'd really recommend getting very specific and niche and only submit to a very small handful of festivals. This way you really can conserve a lot of money in submission fees, but you also significantly increase your chances of getting in if you submit to the smaller festivals that are within the niche of what the subject matter is that's covered in your film. I've learned firsthand that spending thousands of dollars in submission fees to a ton of festivals, especially a lot of the big ones, is really not worth it if you especially don't get in. But even if you do, sometimes the high cost that you pay to submit to all these festivals really doesn't advance your film career in the long run, especially for how much money you're paying to submit to all of these. I honestly recommend rerouting a lot of the budget you would spend on your festival submission fees into hiring a marketing person, running social media ads, maybe bringing on a PR person, or just spending a little extra money to promote your film online, since that can honestly do a lot better bang for your buck for the money that you're going to spend on it anyway. You could also organize your own screening around town and invite a lot of your friends and family if they're local. This is another great way to get a lot of people to see your film very quickly and help spread the word. This is something I only wish we had done much earlier, is have a much more targeted and robust marketing strategy, since we probably spent upwards of over $1,500 in film festival submission fees, which honestly didn't really eventually lead to anything from an advancement standpoint. Another thing to watch out for is online film festivals that take take your money for submission fees and claim to have awards, and often have the word awards in their film festival titles, but don't really even offer any in-person networking events or any in-person screenings. You really want to watch out for those. There's a lot more of these proliferating all over the internet and on Film Freeway. So if you ever get reached out to by these festivals, oftentimes they'll reach out to you first, which the big festivals would never usually do. Usually you would submit to them. So if you get reached out to by any of these festivals that either have something awards in the name or they're for overseas festivals, for ones that you've often never heard of, make sure to do your due diligence, research them before you submit, since I've made the mistake of submitting to a few of these with no essential reward, no networking event, no real festival. They just pocket your submission fee, give you an online certificate, and that's it. One other note about submitting to the really big film festivals like Sundance or South by Southwest is that it tremendously helps your chances of getting in if you know a programmer or somebody on the inside, or you have a known actor in your film or a sales agent to help get your film into the festival. And even then, sometimes with all these things or one of them, there's no guarantee your film will get in. So just something to be aware of, that the odds are definitely stacked against you for these bigger festivals. One major positive though that I do want to point out is sometimes the networking opportunities can be very positive, and I have met some incredible people throughout the years at some of the festivals that I have attended. So this can be something that is worth the price of admission for some filmmakers, though I would say the further on in your career as you go along, this starts to become something that I think is less and less important to go to a festival for, and ends up becoming, again, another expensive way to network when there are much cheaper or zero cost options to do so. Some options you can consider are looking around at your local film scene. If there's filmmaker meetups, networking events, or screenings, try to go to those as much as you can, since those can be very cheap options in which to go network, and it's in your city. Sometimes festivals aren't the smartest use of that post budget. So I think it's very important to ask yourself, what is my goal in submitting to film festivals as a filmmaker? If those major things are to launch your career, I really do believe there are other good ways to do so for zero cost or very little cost. The other thing about self-promoting and trying to market your film more so online or using the internet is this also helps you practice the skill set of marketing, and it exposes you to getting good at pitching your film, knowing how to angle it from a marketing standpoint. Or if you're pitching to an executive and you know how to angle the film, this is a great way to help you learn how to pitch better and helps you in the room. And this is ultimately what ends up helping you get those big film deals or financing for a film or greenlit on a larger scale. So knowing how to market in both realms of online and in person is such a crucial skill, since a lot of times as a filmmaker, you're spending more of your time trying to get the next project made than actually on the set making it. So that marketing mindset really helps you in so many ways to get future projects made. Whereas if you run the festival circuit, you do have to wait at least a year until you can start to put your film out online publicly for people to see. And sometimes that can really hinder your momentum after you've finished your film, since right after you finish, oftentimes you have the fire to want to go promote it right away. Whereas after waiting a year, sometimes it can really be hard to capitalize off that same momentum. And sometimes with that year, you start to feel a little differently about your film, sometimes in a negative light, unfortunately, especially if you don't get into quite as many film festivals as you would hope. And I've seen this happen with quite a bit of my colleagues and even myself. So sometimes that momentum is actually something you need before the self-doubt can start to creep in. I do want to highlight 2 film festivals that Cuddle Buddies got into that were pretty favorable experiences. The first was in New York City, called the New York Indie Shorts Awards. And again, at first I was a little apprehensive because it had the word awards in the title, but I'm so glad I ended up submitting, since it was an in-person event in Manhattan. And I went out to support the film, met some great people that I still keep in touch with, and they really treated us so well as filmmakers and had one of the best Q&A sessions after the film that I've ever been a part of. So that was such a wonderful experience that, again, helped affirm the fact that I felt strongly about my film, and it seemed like the audiences in the crowd did as well. So that's why it's really important to do your research, since the New York Indie Shorts Awards are an incredible in-person festival and not a scam festival. And the other film festival that I got into that was more local to me was the Burbank International Film Festival. One of the cool parts about that was I didn't have to fly out of state to attend, and a lot lot of my friends and family who were around were actually able to attend with me and celebrate the film with me on a big screen. And that was an exciting experience since that was at one of the bigger AMC theaters in the Burbank Town Center. So that was cool to also see the film in its full glory, which really helped make it feel like a real movie at that point. Even though both of those festival experiences were very favorable experiences, neither of them really provided true career advancement for my directing career in the long run. I also did a much more in-depth video on my top 5 reasons why submitting to film festivals as an up-and-coming filmmaker is not worth it. So if you want to check out that video, I'll put a link over here so you can check that one out, where we dive further into my thoughts on film festivals. So give it a watch. Anyone has different thoughts or perspectives on film festivals, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so definitely let me know. Some additional thoughts on marketing and self-promotion. If you decide to submit to film festivals, then you have at least a year until you'll be able to put your film online publicly. And if you don't, then I would immediately consider what your online marketing strategy is going to be, since there's nothing stopping you from putting it out online right away as soon as you finish post. Either way, the following should still apply whether you do the film festival circuit or not. Part 2, talk about your film to everyone. Oftentimes, the cheapest and quickest way to market your film without any tools is just to spread it by word of mouth. Whenever you're at a social function, whenever you're around friends or family, talk about the film. If they ask you what you're up to, that's a perfect opportunity to bring up the film. Give them a quick pitch or log line and see what they say. See if it sounds interesting to them. This is also a really good way to see if your log line and synopsis is working or if you need to rework it, especially since if this is something you're going to eventually pitch to executives or financiers, you want to market test your pitch first with people that you know who can be honest with you before you take it to the more official powers that be that really are going to make a very quick decision and not going to do it based off emotion or friendship. So it's one of those things to iron out as you talk about it more. And by proxy, you're ending up doing a lot of marketing for yourself right there just by talking about it. So anytime you have a chance to, if it feels right, slip it in the conversation, and you'd be amazed at how much this really can organically spread your reach. Doing this really helped me iron out the logline and description for Cuddle Buddies even before we shot the film. Made me realize that, in fact, it was interesting and there was a market for it, since oftentimes people would want to know more about the topic. And because we picked such a unique subject matter, that was a really good talking point that ultimately kept the discussion going once we had started talking about it. And good marketing is the tip of the iceberg for a great conversation to follow. Really think about how your project or subject matter is unique, or how you're telling it's unique, and lean on that when people really want to know why they should invest in your project or watch it or take the time to share it or put their own money into it. If you live in a city like LA, New York, or Atlanta, there are a lot of film professionals who often will ask you what you're working on. They'll want to know. You talk shop about the different jobs you're doing or the industry, and this is also a great way to just talk about the project if the conversation comes up. And this is also a good way to see if maybe somebody you talk to happens to know somebody who actually could help you take it to that next level or advance your filmmaking career. One thing that was really helpful for me is I told hundreds of people about Cuddle Buddies, even as we were in development and even beyond once we were in post-production after we'd shot the film. And it really helped me build the confidence that the project had an audience, but it also helped me build the confidence of how to pitch it with more confidence and assertiveness, and really work that room if I was ever in it in a way that now if I had to walk into a room full of execs, I would feel fully confident to know what to say, how to pitch it, how to angle it, and really help get that thing sold that much more easily. Market testing it and building that confidence gets you to a place where you can almost repeat the log line in your sleep. And this is great because if you're ever in a situation where you do have to pitch it more officially and you start getting nervous, that prep work will come in handy and save you because you'll remember what you were supposed to be talking about because you know it so well. So working this time and time again is also a good way to just practice your pitching skills. Again, this was a really good way to market test the idea, and thank goodness a lot of people really wanted to know more about professional cuddling because it was such a unique industry that not a lot of people know about. So I think in this way, it ended up reaffirming that this was a good idea from the onset to pursue as a writing project from the very get-go. Get comfortable having a very clear, rock solid pitch that's also very concise so that anyone in the room, no matter how old they are, what their experience level is, they can fully understand what you're going for with absolute clarity. Think a lot about the audience and the target demographic, and think about the most electrifying ways to tell the story, especially if the concept is a more mundane idea, but you're telling it in a very interesting way. Market that then, and market the way you're telling it more than the topic itself to make it a much more interesting pitch than if you just talked about the topic that might not be as interesting on the surface. Part 3. Releasing your film online. Let's assume that the time has now come for you to release your film online. I would definitely have thought about this marketing strategy at least 2 to 3 months before you actually put your film online if you can. This way you develop a strategy, you start to even build out maybe specific posts and a timeline of when you want to do the posts. I've always loved countdown marketing strategies where you set a certain number of days leading up to the day you actually release the film. I always find it's just good to pick a number, and then on that first day, just make sure you list the number of days each subsequent day until you actually get to the day of the release. I also find it really helpful to generate a list of post ideas that you want to make for each platform. I also find it helpful to create a basic schedule and a timeline of roughly what posts you want to do and on what platforms and what days and times. Study the algorithms of every social platform and what times are best for each, and really build that into your schedule, because then you'll maximize the absolute most engagement as you can. Once your marketing campaign goes live online, the key is to constantly post day in and day out. I uploaded the highest quality export that I could to Vimeo. Now that you have your link ready, get ready to blast it out. Part 4, social media marketing strategy. So let's get into how I created posts and strategy with examples for virtually every social platform to promote Cuddle Buddies. Instagram. With my strategy for Instagram, I really tried to push a lot of the more stunning visuals and frame grabs, including the 4-quadrant split screen section of the Cuddle montage that we talked about before. We also really pushed the trailer and other different clips from the film, since in more recent years, video clips also started to take off on Instagram. I think it's important to include the most visually stunning, shocking, or evocative imagery that really makes you feel something right away and grabs people quickly, since people's attention spans are much shorter. Have people ask more questions about the film or where it's from or what happens in it, and drive them to want to watch the full film, or directing them to the custom-made Cuddle Buddies page that we made on Instagram. I really leaned into the professional cuddling and intimate aspect of the people cuddling, people hugging, incorporate some of the names of the cuddle positions into the posts or captions, and using words like oxytocin or touch in my captions to really help support that feeling of what we cover in the film in that tone. Also at this time, the lockdown from the COVID pandemic was finally starting to somewhat lift. The touch component was something that I really started to lean into from a marketing standpoint, because we all realized how important touch was once it was removed from us for so long. Always think about how to distinguish your project from all of the other projects that are out there, even with the marketing. So the best way to do this is look at what the current trends are skewing towards and then do the exact opposite. TikTok. So a lot of the clips we posted on TikTok were absolutely videos, and the more visually stunning ones like sections of the split screen. And a lot of times I would just keep them very short, nothing more than 30 seconds, have them ask, what was this from? What is this project? What is cuddling? And really push that cuddling component. The other section I really focused on was the family montage. So that part changes aspect ratios. We have the zoom dolly shot in there. It's a very artistic section of the film. Facebook or Meta. Though Facebook or Meta has really skewed away from the demographic of 30-year-olds and below, and much more towards the parents' generation. So I would often post the Vimeo link to the film with a short description on how important the film was, how much it meant to me, in the hopes that people would see the passion that went into the project. And in turn, if they knew me, they'd want to check it out, even if just to support somebody that they knew. LinkedIn. Over the last few years, I really do feel like LinkedIn has become more of a hub for film industry professionals in a way that it wasn't before. And a lot of posts are put on there, even from studios and streamers, and it very much is a much more professional, business-centric type of site than some of the others. So I really hit LinkedIn hard with more of the professional setting of how we made the film. I also personally love that LinkedIn tends to have a very positive outlook. This was something I also wanted wanted to bring into the feeling of the post was pushing positive energy with some of the captions I wrote. I really tried to push more of the educational component. So for example, I'd put a clip to the film on LinkedIn, and in the description, I'd give a blurb about how we did it or some of the educational components, since I figured the LinkedIn demographic does tend to be much more interested in the process-oriented phase of making art and projects. And a lot of people have actually come across Cuddle Buddies, and it's led to some professional opportunities just because they were able to see what I was capable of on my own terms, even not doing this for an official company or a streamer. So in that way, you just give yourself that much more exposure in the professional world, especially since more and more industry professionals from film really are on there. Email lists. Don't underestimate the power of email lists to spread the word about your project. I have a full email list, mostly of friends, family, and former work colleagues or current work colleagues. And every time I release a new project, I will send this email blast out to at least 180 people. And this is a very quick way to get a lot of people, especially in your direct network, to immediately see your project. And what I like to do is put the link to the film or a GIF in the middle of the body of the email that has a play button. It makes it very easy for them to go immediately to the Vimeo link, watch your film. I usually like to write a nice introductory email that just explains how important this film is to me and that it would really mean the world to me if anybody were to check it out. And I really think hundreds and hundreds of views throughout the years have come from just sending out an email to everybody in one fell swoop. I used to be a lot more afraid to promote any of my work to my network, and over the years, what I've really found is that most people are very excited to see what you've been working on and at least give it a watch or try to help promote it in some way. So a lot of times people just don't know things are out because there's so much out there that they could get distracted by. So push it, don't be afraid. It'll be a good choice, and people are usually always excited to see what you're working on and support you. Substack. Most of the promotional work I do through Substack is really in the form of nonfiction, longer essays that really scratch the surface of some of these technical subjects with filmmaking and the gear and software that we used. The Substack demographic really does tend to be the type of crowd that wants to read much more detailed pieces, and this has been a great way of driving, again, more promotion to the film through these essays I've written that also are a counterpoint to these videos. But it's such a great way to really unpack the process, teach other people, which can be such a great resource, and celebrate how much work you really did when you do a retrospective in a longer form essay. My primary audience with these and with my Substack articles really always been the up and coming filmmaker or current students or high school students or college students that want to learn more about the nuances of filmmaking. But the cool thing is that in addition to that demographic, there have been so many other age groups and people in film, people not in film, who've had the chance to read the articles or watch the film and still develop an appreciation on some side of the equation. Part 5, podcasts. After the film had been online for at least a year, I started to garner more interest and views from various sources. One of the cool parts about it is the very first podcast that I ever did came in the form of TikTok when an old colleague named Aaron Mann saw some of the videos I was posting on TikTok about Cuddle Buddies and immediately contacted me since he had his own podcast and was so intrigued by the visuals that I posted. He wanted to know more about how I made the film, what the film was, and he was willing to schedule a full discussion to talk about the film at length on his podcast that lead to certain people discovering you and want to give you more chances to further promote your film like the podcast. So this was one of the cool things that I hadn't planned as part of the marketing strategy that still ended up driving people to watch the film, but also was so much fun to just be able to talk at length with people who wanted to know, again, more and more under the surface of how we made the film and all the nuances to follow. Aaron is also a fellow artist and an actor and photographer, and the cool thing was that he also understood from an artistic standpoint the film once he saw it, and he knew how to really talk about some of the artistic details. So having that discussion on his podcast called A Man's Journey was one of the highlights of getting to promote this film, especially sort of in the second life of the film after we had released it to the public. We ended up shooting a video podcast that we also edited certain clips of the film into, and we had a very very long, very thorough discussion, and it's on Aaron's YouTube, so I will put a link to the description below so you can check it out on Aaron's YouTube channel. Then a few months later, the generous Scott Martin discovered me on LinkedIn, and he was so intrigued by what it was. He wanted to know more about it, and he sent me an email and said, hey, I think this would be a really cool topic to cover in a podcast. And he has his own podcast called Life's a Road Trip. The focus of that is talking to people with disabilities about their journeys and hardships and overcoming those. And what was cool was he saw the angle in Lucy's story in the film about the overcoming of hardship, but also the need for connection. Whether you have a disability or you don't, connection is still something that's so important and crucial to anyone who's overcoming any kind of hardship in their life. Scott's podcast is amazing, and he's hosted some incredibly resilient people on his podcast, and their life stories are truly inspiring. So I'll definitely put a link to Scott's podcast and our discussion in the description below. That concludes the first part of our discussion on film festivals and marketing. Next week, we'll cover the second part where we really dive into local screenings, developing the feature, and attending local film markets. If you want to continue on this journey with me, then give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment below, hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will definitely catch you next week where we cover the second part of film festivals, marketing, and developing the feature film for Cuddle Buddies. I'll see you then.